Okay, let's just dive right into this. Welcome to The Explainer. I am so thrilled you're here today because honestly, what we're looking at is it's truly fascinating. Our mission today, we are going to deconstruct a dense, single-paragraph creative brief. We're going to see exactly how it functions as a total masterclass in both narrative and technical design. The source text we're digging into is for an animated short film called The Panda of the Frozen North. And what we're going to see is how just a few incredibly meticulously chosen sentences can architect an entire emotional journey, complete with character arcs, wild environmental challenges, and some really strict visual parameters. So let's get right into the anatomy of this cinematic blueprint.
Right off the bat, I want you to think about the immediate geographical juxtaposition the source material hits us with, before we even touch the mechanics of the story. I mean, just think about it. A giant panda wandering around in a vast, frozen Arctic landscape during a totally devastating snowstorm. It instantly grabs you, doesn't it? Like, why on earth is a bamboo-eating bear from the mountains of China suddenly trekking through the frozen north? The creator of this text doesn't waste any time bogging us down with boring exposition. Instead, they literally just drop this captivating, super recognizable hero right into a harsh, unforgiving environment. It sets up this amazing sense of wonder, displacement, and immediate intrigue from literally the very first sentence.
Which brings us to Section 1, the Arctic setup, a truly harsh, frozen world.
Now, this brief is just insanely efficient at assigning classic narrative roles. In just a handful of words, we get a complete, perfectly balanced cast of characters. The giant panda? Explicitly designated as our brave hero, and its singular goal is just to rescue and protect. Then we have the tiny polar bear cub, who is the victim, small, totally frightened, and just trying to survive and reunite with its mom. Next up is the white wolf, acting as our villain, driven purely by this hungry, relentless hunt. And finally, rounding the whole thing out, is the adult polar bear mother, who represents the ultimate emotional resolution and a grateful reunion. There is zero ambiguity here. The source material locks in these classic, unmistakable archetypes, giving the story immediate emotional weight and incredibly clear stakes. And the inciting incident? It is an absolute ticking clock. The source text literally tells us a tiny polar bear cub becomes separated from its mother after drifting away on a broken ice floe. The frightened cub cries for help while dangerous icy water flows beneath. This sets up such a devastating contrast, right? You have this totally indifferent, freezing environment pitted against the sheer vulnerability of a crying cub. It's your classic ticking clock scenario. That dangerous icy water flowing beneath the ice creates a massively urgent life-or-death situation. It forces our panda hero, who, remember, was just casually traveling through the snowy mountains, to act instantly. There's no time to think. There is only time to rescue. So that kicks off Section 2, the relentless chase. The action really escalates here. From there, the creator maps out this incredible high-stakes pursuit that pushes the characters through an exhausting 5-stage geographical progression. First, the panda has to jump across cracked ice just to grab the cub. Then, boom, the hungry white wolf appears, and the chase is officially on. They're sprinting across flat frozen lakes, they're ducking into these claustrophobic icy caves, weaving through dense snow-covered forests, and finally, they are pushed all the way up to steep, steep cliffs. This isn't just a simple run through a plain white background, you know? By listing these really specific, varied terrains, the brief ensures the visual storytelling stays incredibly dynamic. Every single step of the chase introduces a brand new visual palette and a totally new physical challenge for our hero to somehow navigate. And honestly, as if a relentlessly hunting white wolf wasn't enough of a headache, check out the sheer volume of environmental hazards the source text throws at them. We're talking a heavy snowstorm, collapsing ice, blinding blizzards, literal avalanches, frozen rivers, and treacherous frozen bridges. It's crazy. The environment itself is essentially acting as a massive secondary antagonist. The prompt strictly dictates that along this journey, the panda and cub have to face these life-threatening situations constantly. It compounds the danger exponentially. It makes absolutely sure that the audience feels that every single second of the chase is earned, perilous, and just completely unpredictable. All right, moving into Section 3, brains over brawn, how we get a strategic resolution. There is this really stark contrast in how these two characters actually operate. On one side, we have the white wolf, right, representing raw predatory aggression and just a relentless physical hunt. But on the flip side, the giant panda doesn't fight back with claws and teeth. In fact, the source text explicitly states that the panda protects the cub using intelligence, courage, and quick thinking instead of violence. This is a massive, fascinating constraint placed on the narrative. Think about it. The creator is demanding a high-action, high-stakes thriller, but deliberately stripping away violence as a tool for the hero. It totally forces the visual storytelling to be cleverer. It has to be more strategic, relying entirely on wits rather than weapons. So, how exactly do you conclude a massive chase sequence like this without using violence? How do you actually defeat the villain? Well, the text solves it brilliantly. It says, near the end, the wolf falls behind after slipping on the ice and gives up the chase. It is just absolutely perfect in its natural simplicity. The resolution doesn't come from a big fight. It comes from sheer exhaustion and the harsh environment finally catching up with the antagonist. It fits those nonviolent constraints of the brief flawlessly. The panda doesn't physically conquer the wolf. The panda simply outlasts, outmaneuvers, and outsmarts it until nature just takes its inevitable course.
And all of this leads up to a really beautiful emotional payoff. The panda finally reunites the little polar bear with its mother, who of course gratefully hugs her cub. But here's the kicker. The text doesn't just ask for a generic happy ending. It actually demands very specific themes. The story ends with all three of them watching the beautiful northern lights together, quote, symbolizing hope, friendship, bravery, and kindness. The northern lights serve as this incredibly grand, peaceful cinematic contrast to the violent blizzards and cracked ice we saw earlier in the story. It just neatly and beautifully resolves the entire emotional narrative journey the creator set out to build. Which brings us to Section 4, the cinematic blueprint. Let's talk technical parameters.
6 minutes. That is the incredibly tight runtime constraint dictated right at the very beginning of the source text. It says, create a 6-minute animated short film. Now, I want you to really think about everything we literally just broke down. The inciting incident on the ice floe, the 5-stage chase through caves and forests, the avalanches, the non-violent escapes, and that grand emotional reunion under the northern lights. All of that whole shebang has to happen in exactly 360 seconds. This single number totally dictates the rapid, relentless pacing we've been discussing. There is absolutely zero room for filler here. Every single frame has to advance the plot.
And man, the technical specifications are intense. The creator isn't just suggesting a general, vibe. They are laying down strict auditory and visual rules. We are talking Pixar-style 3D animation presented in 8K Ultra HD with a 16:9 ratio. They demand ultra-realistic fur and really expressive facial emotions, which, by the way, is absolutely vital for a story that has zero dialogue and relies entirely on empathy. Throw in cinematic storytelling, dramatic camera movements, Hollywood lighting, and emotional background music. These bullet points basically act as the structural steel holding up the entire creative vision, making absolutely sure the final output is highly polished and deeply, deeply immersive. But what's equally important are the negative constraints, the things the creator absolutely forbids. The text specifically demands a consistent character appearance throughout the entire film, no character changes, absolutely no text, and no watermark. And it's really crucial to understand why these rules exist. When you're dealing with complex visual storytelling, continuity is quite literally everything. By explicitly demanding no random character changes and banning distracting text or watermarks, the creator is enforcing strict, unbreakable guardrails. This guarantees a flawless final output that keeps the viewer completely locked into that Arctic world without any jarring, immersion-breaking errors. So that leads us to our final thought for today's explainer. We literally just watched a single, dense paragraph architect an entire cinematic experience. I mean, it dictated narrative rules, emotional arcs, geographic progressions, and insanely rigid technical specs. So if a blueprint this concise can generate such a vivid masterpiece in our minds, how will these hyper-detailed creative prompts reshape the future of visual storytelling altogether? It really, really makes you marvel at the sheer power of meticulously structured parameters, doesn't it? Well, thank you so much for joining me to explore this fascinating source material. Keep learning, stay focused, and I will catch you in the next explainer.